Tell me, where do you usually watch my videos? At home, work, or somewhere else?
Imagine this. You've scraped by for 20 years, dodging your mother's barbs at every holiday table, only to hit the jackpot of $140 million and finally hold the cards to flip the script. But 1 week before you can drop the bomb at Thanksgiving, she texts you to stay away because you're just a walking embarrassment. So you bite your tongue, snap a photo in front of your sprawling new mansion on the big day, and watch your phone explode with 36 missed calls from the very people who couldn't stand you yesterday. And what happens when the underdog turns the tables without saying a word? Because this story of quiet fury and family fallout will have you questioning every "I told you so" in your own life. At least that's how it unfolded for me. Sarah Jenkins, a 45-year-old waitress from Dayton, Ohio, who had spent the last 2 decades slinging plates at a greasy diner just to keep a roof over my head and my daughter Mia fed through endless shifts that left me bone-tired and questioning every choice that led me there. Growing up in our cramped family home on the outskirts of the city, where the air always smelled of factory smoke and unfulfilled dreams, I navigated a childhood overshadowed by my mother Evelyn's unyielding expectations. Her voice a constant echo of disapproval that shaped every family gathering into an arena of subtle judgments, from the way she critiqued my report cards in elementary school to the outright disdain she showed when I announced my divorce from Rick, that charming facade of a man who turned out to be a storm of anger and empty promises, leaving me with Mia at just 29 and a mountain of bills that seemed insurmountable. Those Thanksgivings etched themselves into my memory like scars. The long wooden table in Evelyn's dining room groaning under the weight of turkey and sides prepared with military precision, yet the real feast was her annual dissection of my life, pointing out how I had squandered opportunities by leaving a stable marriage, how raising Mia on my own in a tiny apartment made me a cautionary tale for my siblings Tom and Lisa, who sat there absorbing it all with varying degrees of complicity. Tom, my older brother by 3 years, offering awkward pats on the back that felt more like pity, and Lisa, the golden child at 42, masking her schadenfreude behind sympathetic smiles while she boasted about her real estate flips and perfect nuclear family. I absorbed those barbs year after year, convincing myself it was just Evelyn's way of tough love, born from her own hardships as a widow raising 3 kids on a secretary salary. But deep down, the accumulation wore on me like a slow erosion, making me vow silently during one particularly brutal holiday when she declared I brought nothing but disappointment to the table, that someday I would rewrite that narrative, prove to them all that I was capable of more than survival. That turning point arrived on a drizzly Tuesday evening in mid-October after a grueling 12-hour shift where the diner's fluorescent lights buzzed like accusations and the tips barely covered gas for the week, when I stopped at the corner store on impulse and bought a Mega Millions ticket, scratching it off absent-mindedly while heating up leftovers for Mia, only to watch the numbers align in a surreal cascade that announced I had won $140 million, the kind of life-altering sum that lottery officials verified the next day with stone-faced efficiency, transforming my exhaustion into a whirlwind of guarded elation as I shielded the news from everyone, even Mia at first, until I pulled her aside in our cluttered kitchen and shared the secret, her eyes widening with a mix of disbelief and joy that mirrored my own racing thoughts. In the days that followed, I moved with calculated caution, hiring a team of lawyers and financial advisors who navigated the paperwork to claim the prize anonymously, setting up trusts that would secure Mia's future with college funds and a safety net I never imagined providing, while I began envisioning the practical changes: a reliable car to replace my rattling old sedan, perhaps a down payment on a house with space for Mia to pursue her passion for drawing without the walls closing in, and most tantalizingly, the opportunity to step into that next Thanksgiving not as the family pariah, but as the architect of my own redemption, promising myself in the quiet hours after Mia fell asleep that I would reveal the win right there at the dinner table, laying out the facts over Evelyn's famous pumpkin pie without fanfare or vengeance, simply letting the truth dismantle the years of shame they had layered upon me. The plan sustained me through the initial chaos of media whispers about an anonymous winner in Ohio and the internal debates over how much to share with a family that had offered little in return, but I held firm, finding unexpected humor in the absurdity of it all, like chuckling to myself while browsing real estate listings that showed homes grander than anything Evelyn's critical I had ever approved, or imagining Tom's slack-jawed reaction when he realized his struggling brother-in-law days were over if I chose to extend a hand. Yet as the calendar flipped closer to the holiday, small fissures appeared in my resolve, particularly after Tom called one crisp afternoon, his voice thick with the strain of unspoken worries, hinting at mounting pressures back home with phrases like, "Mom's been on edge about bills again," and probing gently if I had any extra to lend, forcing me to deflect with tales of my own tight finances while my mind raced with the irony of my hidden fortune, leaving me to hang up and stare at the phone. A knot of uncertainty tightening in my chest as I wondered what other secrets simmered beneath the surface of our fractured family dynamic, the weight of impending revelations pressing heavier with each unanswered question about whether this windfall would heal old wounds or simply illuminate how deep they ran. With the lottery windfall secured through a labyrinth of legal maneuvers orchestrated by my advisor Harold, a pragmatic man in his late 50s whose no-frills office in downtown Dayton became my second home over those first few weeks, I began to tentatively explore the contours of this newfound abundance, starting with practical safeguards like diversifying the funds into low-risk bonds and a college trust for Mia that promised her an unburdened path toward the art career she sketched out in her notebooks during quiet evenings, while I resisted the urge to splurge wildly, opting instead for measured indulgences that whispered of stability rather than extravagance, such as upgrading our creaky apartment's appliances to ones that hummed efficiently without the constant threat of breakdown. Those early days carried an electric thrill, the kind that hummed beneath my skin as I drove Mia to school in a leased SUV that replaced my old rust bucket, its leather seats a subtle luxury that made her chatter excitedly about potential road trips to coastal spots we had only dreamed of in magazine clippings, and in those moments of shared anticipation, I allowed myself to envision a reconciliation with the family, picturing how the revelation at Thanksgiving might soften Evelyn's edges, transforming her perennial critiques into reluctant admiration as I outlined plans to perhaps alleviate Tom's financial strains or bolster Lisa's business ventures, turning the holiday into a bridge rather than a battlefield. Yet the euphoria often collided with vivid flashbacks to the humiliations Evelyn had inflicted over the years, like that sweltering summer barbecue when Mia was 8 and I arrived late from a double shift, only for Evelyn to pull me aside in front of the relatives and hiss that my disheveled appearance was an embarrassment, her words slicing through the smoky air as Tom averted his eyes and Lisa busied herself with the grill, leaving me to paste on a smile while inside I seethed at how she weaponized concern to underscore my supposed inadequacies, from my choice to divorce Rick after his tempers escalated beyond tolerance to my refusal to remarry just to fit her vision of propriety. I confided some of these recollections to Harold during our sessions, where he advised setting ironclad boundaries before any family disclosures, warning with a wry chuckle that windfalls like mine often unearthed relatives' true colors faster than a Midwest storm. And his counsel resonated as I journaled late at night, weighing the risks of generosity against the scars of neglect, ultimately recommitting to my original promise of silence until the turkey was carved, believing that timing the reveal amid the warmth of tradition would maximize its impact without inviting premature opportunism. The humor in navigating this secret life emerged in unexpected ways, such as when I treated myself to a spa day for the first time, emerging with manicured nails and a massage loosened back, only to laugh inwardly at the thought of Evelyn's scandalized reaction to such frivolity from her wayward daughter, or during a casual lunch with Mia where we role-played the family dinner, her imitating Tom's gruff voice with exaggerated pleas for "just a little help, sis," both of us dissolving into giggles that lightened the undercurrent of apprehension building as the holiday loomed. Even the light vulgarity of everyday frustrations found a place, like muttering to myself about what a steaming pile of nonsense it was that Lisa had once suggested I move in with them during my leanest months, only to retract the offer when it suited her schedule, a hypocrisy that now fueled my determination to handle the windfall on my terms, fostering an atmosphere of quiet defiance as I researched therapists to unpack the generational baggage Evelyn had passed down like heirloom china, cracked for misuse. Uncertainty threaded through every decision, from whether to inform old Dinne colleagues who had become like surrogate family to the nagging doubt about Tom's probing call from the previous week, which hinted at deeper familial currents swirling beneath the surface, but I pressed forward, curating a mental list of post-reveal gestures, perhaps anonymous donations to the local food bank Evelyn volunteered at, or scholarships in her name for single mothers, hoping these would underscore my growth beyond resentment, all while the calendar's relentless march toward Thanksgiving amplified the internal conflict, making each day a delicate balance between guarded excitement and the fear that one misplaced word could unravel the careful facade I had constructed. That delicate equilibrium shattered one overcast afternoon when an email from Evelyn pinged into my inbox unannounced, its subject line a curt, holiday arrangements, that belied the laced condescension in her prose, detailing the menu contributions expected from each family member with meticulous detail, assigning me the lowly task of bringing store-bought rolls as if my contributions were interchangeable with paper plates, and slipping in a veiled barb about how some attendees should focus on gratitude rather than excuses, leaving me to reread the message with a rising heat in my chest, fingers hovering over the reply button as the impending holiday suddenly felt less like redemption and more like a trap waiting to spring, the weight of her unspoken judgments pressing down with renewed force. As the email from Evelyn lingered in my inbox like an unwelcome guest refusing to leave, its assignments for the holiday potluck grating against my plans for a dignified reveal, I channeled the simmering irritation into forward momentum, deciding that the weeks leading up to Thanksgiving would be my time to lay foundational stones for the life this windfall enabled, beginning with a shopping excursion to the upscale mall on the city's edge where I selected a few wardrobe essentials that aligned with the poised version of myself I intended to present. Items like tailored blouses and comfortable yet elegant boots that evoked the professional women I admired in lifestyle magazines rather than the diner uniform I had worn like a badge of endurance for so long. Mia joined me for part of the outing, her enthusiasm bubbling over as we tried on accessories in the brightly lit stores, and in those shared moments, amid the scent of fresh pretzels from the food court, we delved into deeper conversations about the future. Her sketching out visions of studying illustration at a prestigious school in Chicago, while I described a potential home with a sunlit studio for her creations and a garden where we could host friends without the echo of past judgments. The bond between us strengthening as she expressed quiet relief at leaving behind the apartment's thin walls and the occasional taunts from neighborhood kids about our single-parent setup. Those interactions infused the preparations with a sense of possibility, countering the uncertainty that Evelyn's message had stirred. Yet they also unearthed subtle tensions when I confided in Mia about the family dynamics. Her young perspective cutting through with observations like how Aunt Lisa always seemed to one-up everyone with her stories, prompting me to reflect on the jealousy that might underpin their attitudes. A realization that added layers to my internal debate over whether to extend olive branches post-reveal or protect our newfound peace more fiercely. The humor surfaced during a light-hearted dinner at home that evening, where Mia and I experimented with a recipe from an online video, our kitchen filling with the aroma of garlic and herbs as we laughed over my clumsy attempts at chopping onions. Me joking that if Evelyn saw me wielding a knife like that, she'd probably accuse me of being too aggressive even in cooking, a quip that eased the knot in my stomach while highlighting the absurdity of her perpetual nitpicking, from critiquing my parenting style during Mia's toddler years to dismissing my side hustles as pipe dreams that distracted from real stability. Expanding on those small luxuries, I scheduled a meeting with an interior designer recommended by Harold, who helped map out modest renovations for whatever home we chose. emphasizing functionality over flash to avoid the pitfalls of sudden wealth that stories in the news often warned about, like flashy purchases leading to regret, and this proactive approach bolstered my confidence, making the holiday feel like a pivotal checkpoint rather than an ordeal, even as I fielded a casual text from Tom checking in on my holiday plans, with an undertone that suggested he was fishing for more details on our finances. The twist came unexpectedly during a routine errand at the local supermarket a few days later, where I rounded an aisle stocked with seasonal decorations and nearly collided with Lisa, her arms laden with premium ingredients for what she described as her signature stuffing, and after the initial pleasantries laced with her probing questions about my work schedule, she let slip a comment about how Evelyn had been venting to her about my unreliability for family events, revealing in a moment of unguarded frustration that she had been the one feeding Evelyn details from my social media posts, innocent updates about Mia's school projects twisted into narratives of neglect, to reinforce the family's narrative of me as the outlier, a meddling that explained the sharpened barbs in recent communications and left me reeling as I nodded politely and excused myself. The betrayal stinging like salt in an old wound because it underscored how Lisa's jealousy over my independence had festered into active sabotage, perhaps stemming from her own stalled career ambitions masked by suburban perfection. This discovery amplified the growing conflict within me, pitting my promise of revelation against a rising tide of resentment that questioned the value of salvaging ties built on such foundations. And I spent the following evening poring over old emails and photos, piecing together patterns of exclusion that Evelyn's irritability seemed to orchestrate, her recent messages growing curt and demanding as if projecting her own unspoken stresses onto me, hints of financial strain filtering through in offhand mentions of cutting back on traditions. The light vulgarity of the situation struck me while venting to Harold over the phone, grumbling about what a bunch of baloney it was that my own sister played informant to keep me down, his sympathetic laugh reminding me to document everything for potential boundary setting later, fostering an atmosphere thick with impending confrontation as I balanced excitement for Mia's upcoming art class funded by the win with the dread of Evelyn's next communication. Uncertainty loomed larger with each passing day, dilemmas arising over whether to confront Lisa directly or let the holiday expose the hypocrisies organically, but I held course, focusing on a quiet family outing to a nearby pumpkin patch where Mia and I selected gourds for carving, the crisp autumn air carrying whispers of change, while my mind raced with scenarios of the dinner unfolding until late that night. As I scrolled through responses to a neutral holiday poll on a community forum, my phone buzzed with a text from Evelyn that cut through the digital noise like a blade, its words stark and unyielding. In declaring that I should not show up to Thanksgiving because I brought nothing but shame, the message landing with such finality that it shattered the fragile anticipation I had nurtured, leaving me breathless on the edge of a decision that could redefine everything. The text from Evelyn burned in my mind like a brand that refused to fade, its dismissal echoing through the quiet hours of that night and into the next morning as I lay awake beside Mia's soft breathing. The weight of her words not just excluding me from the holiday, but stripping away the fragile hope I had pinned on that gathering as my moment of vindication, prompting me to rise early with a resolve sharpened by years of swallowed retorts, deciding that if she saw me as nothing but shame, I would craft a response that embodied the opposite without stooping to her level of direct confrontation, a strategy that felt both empowering and laced with the witty satisfaction of turning her rejection into fuel for my ascent. By the time the sun filtered through the apartment blinds, I had already dialed Harold, my voice steady as I outlined the need for a significant property purchase to anchor our new chapter. Something substantial yet grounded that symbolized permanence away from the familial orbit that had long dictated my sense of worth, and he connected me swiftly with Carla, a real estate agent whose warm Midwestern drawl and keen understanding of discreet high-end deals made the process feel less like a transaction and more like claiming territory long denied. We toured several estates that afternoon under a sky heavy with impending rain, each one more impressive than the last, from a modern ranch with sleek lines overlooking a private lake to a historic Victorian brimming with character. But it was the colonial mansion on the outskirts of Centerville that captured my vision completely, its white-columned facade rising gracefully against a backdrop of rolling lawns and ancient oaks. The interior boasting 5 spacious bedrooms with hardwood floors that gleamed under natural light pouring through tall windows, a gourmet kitchen where Mia could experiment with her budding culinary interests, and a wraparound porch perfect for evenings unwinding with a book or simply breathing in the freedom of space untainted by past echoes. Signing the papers in Carla's office felt like sealing a pact with myself, the 7-figure down payment transferring seamlessly through the accounts Harold had fortified, and as I walked the empty halls later that day with Mia in tow, her footsteps echoing with delight as she darted from room to room claiming territories for her art supplies and a future guest suite perhaps for friends rather than obligatory family visits, a profound shift settled over me, this purchase emerging as my inaugural act of revenge, clever in its silence, because it built an unassailable foundation of independence, while Evelyn and the others remained ensnared in their cycle of judgments and dependencies, oblivious to the empire rising just miles from their doorstep. The humor in the unfolding drama tickled me during the drive home, as I imagined Lisa's wide-eyed envy upon glimpsing the property online or Tom's awkward attempts to downplay it as lucky timing, chuckling at how Evelyn's stern holiday edicts paled against the reality of my vaulted ceilings and infinity views. A light vulgarity slipping into my thoughts when I muttered to Mia about what a colossal load of nonsense it was that my mother had spent decades portraying me as the family failure, only for this windfall to rewrite the script in strokes of marble countertops and landscaped serenity. Yet beneath the triumph, subtle clues to the family's unraveling continued to surface, particularly through a voicemail from Tom that I played back while supervising the initial mover consultations. His tone laced with desperation as he alluded to Evelyn's escalating tempers over unexpected expenses tied to a string of poor investment choices she had chased in hopes of supplementing her fixed income, a revelation that twisted the knife of her rejection by suggesting her cruelty stemmed not just from ingrained bias, but from personal pressures she deflected onto me, painting a picture of hidden debts that Lisa's meddling might have exacerbated through her own real estate schemes gone awry. This insight deepened the uncertainty swirling around my choices, dilemmas arising over whether to intervene anonymously in their predicaments or let the consequences of their hypocrisies play out. Especially as Mia and I settled into tentative routines at the mansion, unpacking boxes amid the scent of fresh paint and possibility, where conversations turned introspective about the boundaries we would set moving forward. Her teenage wisdom reminding me that forgiveness didn't require forgetting the patterns of exclusion that had shaped our holidays into minefields. The growing conflict manifested in restless nights where I weighed the allure of complete severance against the lingering pull of blood ties, the impending revenge evolving from a vague notion into a tangible strategy of curated visibility, all while the calendar marked the arrival of Thanksgiving with inexorable certainty, transforming what was once a dreaded obligation into a canvas for subtle reckoning. On the morning of the holiday itself, with the aroma of a herb-roasted turkey wafting from the professional-grade oven that Mia and I had prepared together as our own defiant feast, I stepped out onto the Duchess lawn in the simple green wool dress I had chosen weeks earlier, the fabric soft against my skin as I positioned myself before the mansion's imposing entrance, sunlight casting a golden halo around the columns that framed my silhouette like a portrait of reclaimed dignity, snapping a single photo with my phone that captured not just the grandeur of the home, but the quiet strength in my crossed arms and steady gaze, the image ready to post with a caption evoking gratitude for fresh starts, and as my thumb hovered over the share button, heart pounding with the thrill of unleashing this silent thunderbolt, the world seemed to pause on the brink of chaos, leaving me suspended in that electric moment of anticipation for the fallout that would surely follow. Pressing the share button on that carefully composed photo sent a shiver through me that had nothing to do with the crisp Thanksgiving air nipping at my skin. The image of myself standing resolute before the mansion's elegant columns, broadcasting a message of unyielding transformation to my modest social media circle, where old acquaintances from the diner and a handful of distant cousins lurked without suspecting the depths of the change it represented, the simple caption about embracing new beginnings masking the undercurrent of calculated retribution that pulsed beneath every pixel, and within moments, the notifications began trickling in like the first drops of a downpour. Likes and surprised comments from folks who remembered me as the steadfast single mom now appearing inexplicably elevated, their reactions a prelude to the storm I knew would hit once the family network activated its inevitable gossip chains. Mia and I retreated inside to our makeshift holiday spread, the table. Laden with golden turkey slices, cranberry relish we had simmered from fresh berries, and warm apple pie cooling on the windowsill, her eyes sparkling with mischief as she refreshed the app on her tablet, pointing out the rapid escalation to shares that would undoubtedly reach Evelyn's feed through Lisa's vigilant monitoring, and in that shared anticipation, a thread of humor wove through the tension when she quipped about how Aunt Lisa's perfect Instagram life was about to get photobombed by reality, both of us stifling laughs over the irony of my silent flex disrupting their scripted festivities while we savored bites that tasted of independence rather than obligation. The deluge arrived precisely 10 minutes later, my phone erupting in a symphony of vibrations that piled up 36 missed calls in quick succession, the screen lighting up with names that blurred into a roster of past grievances. Lisa first. Her voicemails a frantic blend of incredulity and accusation, demanding to know if the photo was some edited fantasy meant to upstage their gathering before shifting to wheedling inquiries about how we could all benefit from this, her voice cracking with the strain of feigned concern that rang false against the backdrop of her earlier betrayals. Followed closely by Tom's barrage, each message more disjointed than the last as he alternated between congratulations laced with slurs from whatever drink he had smuggled into Evelyn's dry household and urgent appeals for financial intervention, confessing in one particularly rambling outburst that the family's mounting debts stemmed from Evelyn's ill-advised plunges into volatile stocks peddled by a shady advisor Lisa had recommended. A twist that illuminated the web of complicity binding them, where my exclusion served as a convenient distraction from their collective unraveling. I let the calls accumulate while pouring second helpings for Mia, the growing pile a testament to the swift unraveling of their composure, but when Evelyn's number flashed for the fourth time, I answered with a measured calm that belied the satisfaction blooming inside, her initial outburst a torrent of denial calling the image a cheap ploy for pity, quickly dissolving into sobs that pleaded for clarification and an immediate visit, her admissions tumbling out in fragments about how the holiday dinner had turned awkward with relatives whispering over their phones, forcing her to confront the facade of control she had maintained for years. My responses emerged clever and laced with the witty edge of long-deferred justice, deflecting her demands with phrases like, "Shame must be contagious, Mom, since it vanished the moment pixels got involved," or, "Funny how gratitude shows up uninvited when backyards turn into estates," each retort satisfying the revenge impulse without descending into outright cruelty. Drawing out more revelations such as Tom's quiet betrayal and pocketing family emergency funds meant for shared hardships like my post-divorce struggles, a disclosure that made Mia's eyebrows shoot up from across the table as she eavesdropped, her silent nod affirming the wisdom of our boundaries even as it stirred a flicker of pity complicated by the fresh sting of hypocrisy. The light vulgarity of their desperation filtered through in Evelyn's frustrated asides about what a heap of trouble this caused her perfectly planned meal, prompting me to counter with a chuckle over the line about how my failures apparently cooked up seven-figure surprises, the exchange heightening the emotional undercurrents as I navigated the dilemma of extending mercy, perhaps wiring a modest sum to ease their immediate crunch through an intermediary herald suggested, against the audience of my own conscience urging complete detachment, choices that might strike outsiders as unforgiving yet felt essential to safeguarding the peace Mia and I had begun to cultivate amid the mansion's welcoming expanse. As the calls dwindled into a flurry of texts promising apologies and renewed invitations stripped of their former barbs, the atmosphere thickened with unresolved tension. The uncertainty of whether this exposure would forge tentative amends or widen irreparable chasms pressing upon me like the fading daylight outside. And when the final notification chimed from Evelyn, a raw plea to talk this through, Sarah, before it's too late, I set the phone face down on the polished wood, staring at its silent glow while Mia cleared plates with a knowing glance, the weight of potential reconciliation hanging in the balance, leaving me to ponder in the quiet aftermath if answering would reclaim a fractured family or merely invite the old cycles back through the door I had so painstakingly fortified, the ambiguity lingering like the last notes of a half-finished song, inviting endless speculation on the true cost of fortune and forgiveness.